It's a little woo-woo.
Excellent. Now we will proceed onto the fourth dimension. That is the Buddhic dimension. Now, why it sounds like Buddhism, as I explained before, is because Buddhism is derived from this Buddhic plane. And the Buddhic plane is described as the it's where the ego dissolves like salt in the ocean. That's why Buddhism is all about letting go of that ego. It points to the Buddhic dimension. Now, it is in the Buddhic dimension where we not only allow our ego to dissolve in the ocean like salt, but what we do in doing so, in letting our ego go, what we do is we take on the position of the observer. So now, Buddhic, meaning unity, becomes now you, the individual, you begin to observe unity itself. It is where it is in the Buddhic dimension. It is where truth simply shines. When unity is observed in this way, it becomes a tuning fork that sets the ether to this higher vibration. So that is the function of the Buddhic dimension. Its character is one of unity, but what its function is that it functions as an anchor. So you, the observer, the one who's now observing unity, because you observe unity, you can formalize unity, you can conceptualize it. And it's that understanding of unity that becomes your anchor as you now further develop and explore inside the world of the physical. You understand? We need to understand and begin to observe, become in this state of observation. Now, what does it mean to be in a state of the observer? This is a very good way of how you can also measure your emotions when we are there in the astral plane. We want to keep our emotions measured. We want to be responsible emotional beings. Now, a way of keeping that emotion measured is by keeping it relative to unity, which means next time I feel like I'm overwhelmed by emotion, what is the good position to be in? What is the test? Well, I need to be able to anchor unity within that multiplicity of emotions. I can only do that once I have an understanding of becoming the observer. And it is as soon as you begin to observe yourself that you actually create just enough space between thinking and doing where you can then fit compassion in. That compassion comes in when you begin to observe yourself, become the observer. When you begin to observe yourself, you begin to become a bit more objective about your own behavior. And that is in the same way you begin to look at other people a bit more objectively. Widen the space between thinking and doing, just enough for compassion to fit in. Then you are beginning to experience the Buddhic dimension. But a very cool thing happens when you as an individual, remember I teach practicality here. I'm a very functional person, as my sister-in-law would put it. I like functional things. And the same thing with what I teach. It must be functional. So how is this Buddhic dimension and an understanding of its character and lesson going to help me in my everyday? So let's just recap. So the Buddhic dimension is the fourth. It is the dimension of unity. You let go of your ego. So the function of this dimension is to anchor the individual in unity. So what is then my ultimate lesson that I need to graduate? That lesson that I need to graduate within the Buddhic dimension is not that I now need to separate myself from the multiplicities of life, because now I'm observing unity. And unity is like fresh, clean water, sweet, it's beautiful, and it's a type of water you can't find in the world of matter and multiplicity. But now, is the test that I must now just drop multiplicity, the world of matter, and just move into unity and just be there on a mountain? That doesn't really sound like it's a very practical lesson, is it? No. What we are supposed to learn here through the Buddhic dimension, which operates as an anchor, is observe the unity in everything. That means you begin to anchor unity in multiplicity. That's what we need to learn. That's how we graduate this dimension. Anchor unity into multiplicity. Where's a practical example of this? Well, it's exactly absolute reason. This is exactly what I want to carry through from human to human. Let us anchor unity in the multiplicities of our culture, of our religion, of our races, of our everything. We need to anchor unity. How do we anchor unity? Well, we all understand the goal that we want to achieve. That goal is spiritual evolution and world peace. That's what we want to achieve. Now we are on step 4 already of that map that we now are developing in order to get our destination. Because remember, a map is only useful to the one who has and knows the destination. We're working our map now. And what our map is teaching us is that it is in the school of illusion. The purpose of this life is to see through the illusion. We see through the illusion by an understanding of our 7 dimensions. And it's in the 4th dimension that we learn that we need to anchor unity in multiplicity. In doing so, what do? Well, we change the very atmosphere around us. What does this do? Listen to this. Truth simply shines within this Buddhic dimension. When unity is observed in this way, it becomes a tuning fork that sets the ether to this higher vibration. We have all felt this. We know this feeling. Our etheric double has shown us this feeling. Where somebody one specific person walks into a building and everybody changes. The entire atmosphere changes because of that person's presence. That is the Buddhic dimension. It can be perverted, and there can be a huge pervert walking into the room and everybody is feeling icky and creepy crawly. So Bill Gates just arrived. Or we all feel at peace, still, calm. We want to absorb and just observe. Candace Owens just walked into the building. There's light and then there's perversion of light. And by an understanding that we now need to anchor unity in multiplicity, the same way we are anchoring sacred physics, we are human before we are the multiplicities of our religion. This is the Buddhic dimension at play. So we need to anchor unity in the multiplicity of the world of matter. There's your lesson of the Buddhic dimension. Let us graduate. So now we are observing unity. What happens next? Then we move into the Atmic plane. Now, the Atmic plane is described as divine will. It is your essence. That is the character. When we talk about Atmic, we're talking about your essence as a spiritual being with 7 bodies active, One active on the other, one pressing onto the other, influencing each other. There's the slinky. It's always the slinky. There goes the slinky again. Slinky, slinky, slinky. You know, I have a slinky here. And there's my other slinky. It's a slinky. Right. So, in the slinky, the essence of the slinky, that's the very core, the material the slinky is made of. That was always fun. I enjoyed doing this as a kid also. It's just fun, man. Don't hit your nose. So I'm looking up a little. But it's fun. But what is the slinky made of? What is the essence of the slinky? Well, that is your atmic dimension. The atmic dimension is action born of essence. It is where essence becomes the force replacing effort. This blew my hair back. So remember when we were discussing the first three planes, thinking, feeling, doing. The physical plane, the astral plane, and then the mental plane. When we were discussing that, what we said when it came to especially the astral plane, we were talking about emotions and effort. And then when we came to where was it? Reflex. Yes, it was. Yeah, the astral plane, where we were talking about desire, your feeling about a thing. And I said to you that when it comes to our desires and pursuing our desires, we are taught that it's self-determination. It is your own personal effort alone that will get you there. Okay. But my human effort, I think we can all agree, is different to a godly effort. And as we have all established, is that we are sacred beings. We have a direct pathway to God. God's light shines through us, and it's all about how clean and clear that mirror is that does the reflection of God's light into the world of matter, like a rainbow. How clean and clear is that mirror? How well do I reflect the will of God? The will of God, your essence. So if you clear this mirror, it reflects, man, pure and perfect and complete. What happens then? Well, then you are functioning from the atmic plane. And you're going to say, oh man, I've met like a whole lot of spiritual pastors and teachers and guys in orange robes and this and that. I don't feel this essence of God from them. I haven't seen how the essence of God, this atmic dimension, how does it reflect in my everyday? Where have I seen this before? It's a very cool spot, and you will all know it when I point it out. You have observed the force of essence when you observe athletes, sports people. How often you have heard a tennis player saying, dude, I was so in the zone. Have you heard the woman? Men tennis players, they're quiet. Woman, ha-ee, ha-ooh, ha-ha. Anyways, but even through the ha-ee, ha-ooh, ha-ha, or the stillness of the men, what you find there is every now and then you see one of those athletes and they say, I was so in the zone. Time just evaporated. A ball that is this big became this big. Every time I hit it spot on, knock on, it became an art piece. A symphony coming together. And you know what, through all of that, 3 hours later, I wasn't even tired. What is that? What is it when an athlete tells you I was in the zone? Well, that is the atmic dimension pressing through. And it's in the atmic dimension that we now begin, the essence becomes the force. This is where your essence as a sacred being becomes the very force that propels your actions in this physical world in the same way it does with an athlete when they are in the zone. No longer is it your individual effort that's bringing the force to the game of tennis. No. It's the very essence of your sacred being that becomes that force. Effort falls away and it becomes effortless. You see, that is what it means to be effortless. Effort falls away because I'm acting from my essence. And my essence is now the force that propels my action. Pretty flippin' cool. So when it comes then to your atmic dimension, it is basically a channel of divine will. There is no struggle, there is only flow. Now, this is how nations are shooketh. Nations, not individuals, not cultures, not fictional political parties that don't mean anything. What happens here is that the atmic force, it is the very channel of divine will that is cleared by individuals like you and I. We don't know about the politicians. You need to prove yourself. Yeah, I think you're dodgy. You got to prove yourself. But as for you and I, the more people like you and I, those of us who choose a higher way of thinking, not a low way of thinking, those of us who choose to go with an understanding of my visible and my invisible parts and the 7 dimensions. The more of us come together, that is us anchoring our unity and multiplicity, but now by clearing all of our mirrors together, it opens the channel of divine will, and boop, we go into the atmic dimension. Now what happens there? If we have multiple people, I don't need billions. I'm dealing with sacred physics here. Small things, big outcomes. But groups. If we have groups of people with this understanding, and we open our channels for the divine will of God to flow through us, that is when you get revolutions. That is when nations are shooketh. We want nations to shake, not from bombs. Politicians, sit down and put those buttons back. Just the little red buttons. It's not a lollipop. Put down the button. We don't need to bomb people to shake a nation. What we need to do is we need to anchor unity in our multiplicity. I took the politicians too serious, and then I had to now laugh at myself at calling it multiplicity. So multiplicity. We're going to anchor unity in multiplicity, and in doing so, we're going to open our channels, individuals, groups, nations, societies, the world. We're going to open our channels, and God's divine will flow through us and shake nations. And what will it do? All the beauty queens come together. What will this bring to us? World peace. That's what we want. We want world peace. Politician, nothing else will do. I don't want to hear from you unless it's world peace and spiritual evolution. Otherwise, you shut it. Sit down. You need to listen more. So now we are understanding the atmic plane. Oh, wait, I need to tell you what is the lesson this atmic dimension brings to us. It is the atmic dimension lesson for us to learn our soul's naked purpose. It is for us to understand that it's the fire of divine will. Normal will is limited by fear, desire, and indecision. So the lesson we need to learn in order to graduate the atomic plane, and in doing so, shake nations and bring world peace. The lesson we need to learn is that our normal will is limited, but together we can open the channels of divine will to flow. And as soon as we see how that brings change, everyday practical change, shut it. Politicians, shut it. Practical change with dumb politicians who always choose a lower mind of thinking, where they no longer have even the option of killing another. I don't care what nation they're from. I don't care what skin color they have. And I don't care what egregore you have created in the mental plane to such a degree where you think it's okay to genocide in the Middle East. That is an egregore on you, on a nation. I know all about egregores. I was born in the 80s into apartheid, and I come from a military family. What thought forms do you think came upon me that I had to break through? So I don't want to hear about your nonsense. We are humanity, and we are learning what it is to be a human. And in doing so, we raise ourselves by understanding that killing, murder, aggression is not the way. We're going to anchor our unity into multiplicity. Then we're going to change the atmosphere around us in doing so. And when we change that atmosphere, the more easy it will become for every day, my neighbor, my auntie, my uncle, my mother, my sister, everybody. We can clear those mirrors, and God's divine will and the channel of that will be clean and clear of any obstruction and distortion, and we will together shake nations. Sit down, politicians. Humanity is about to rise. So then we come to the monadic plane. After we have learned that it's not about our individual effort, but it's about the divine will of God flowing through us, becoming the very force pushing us. Once we learn that lesson, we move into the monadic plane. And this is the eternal, traveler part of who you are. This is spark of the flame. It is the seed of being. It is the part of God that God subdivides as He ascends into matter. That spark of God that is within us all, that is the eternal exploring part of God, wanting to explore Himself more through the multiplicities of matter. So the seed of being in the monadic plane ascends, it descends into the world of matter. And we all walk with this spark. And that is its character. It's a spark of life. It is what brings pulse to us, rhythm. Life is a rhythm. So life is a rhythm, the pulse that comes from the very seed of being generated by God Himself. Life is a rhythm. Light is the music, how I choose to look at things. But me, with all my weird quirks and funky personality, badass attitude, and a little bit of, yes, I'm angry at politicians. Yes, all of that is my dance. Life is a rhythm. Light is the music, and you are the dance. And it is in the monadic plane that we can feel, and even on a very physical level, when you meditate, you can hear that monadic pulse. It is what they call the mantra. It is a specific sound, a current that runs through everything. It is the very seed of being, the pulse of creation. That becomes the mantra of creation. And that is us then understanding that it's more than understanding, it's awareness. So let me read this to you, and then I'm going to flick back to the Buddhic plane, and you're going to see why. So the monadic plane is our seed of being. It's a very pulse of creation. What our lesson is here is that we need to become aware. Now, what do we become aware of? Well, individuality collapses. It turns the individual to living transmitters. It is an awareness that there is no separation. I am a transmitter. There is no separation between me and the very spark of being. There is no separation. But how is that different to the Buddhic dimension, where we said it's unity? In the Buddhic dimension, you are observing unity. There is still two. I am observing unity, but it's still two parts forming a relationship. When it comes to the monadic plane, even that collapses. Your entire individuality collapses. And when your individuality collapses, what happens? I cannot observe anything outside of me, because only way something can be outside of me is if my individuality creates boundaries that then brings about an inside and an outside. In the Buddhic plane, I still have those boundaries. I have an inside and an outside. And that's why I need to observe unity. But in the monadic plane, this eternal explorer, the spark of being, that life force that we all have and everything has, what is that? Now there, your individuality, the boundaries that form you as an individual, all of that collapses. And it becomes Advaita, not two. That's the best way of explaining it. The monadic state is the not two state. And even that's still falling short, because you're still kind of referring to two parts, but not referring to spiritual. And all the philosophers go, oh, we don't know what you're saying. It's very simple. Your individuality collapses and you realize nothing is two. There is nothing to observe. There is nothing to reject. There is nothing to accept. There is just unity. And even unity itself falls short. It is not two. Now, when you begin to realize that, what you realize is that very point, that very monadic point of everything that you are, and in this very moment you are active on this monadic point. But if you become aware of that monadic point, how it functions in your very practical life is extremely powerful. Now think about this. I'm a South African girl, woman, 44, so I guess I'm a woman now. Don't feel 44. So I'm a 44-year-old woman. I find myself in a predicament. It's South Africa. I'm on a dark road, walking. No one knows how I got there and why. The point is, I'm there and I'm in danger. It's a dangerous place. And although I usually have 2 knives on me and a pit bull and perhaps even a gun or 2, I don't that day. So I don't even feel safe in that way. Or perhaps I don't have those weapons with me today, because just perhaps that day, what I am focusing on, what I am observing, what through the double slit experiment I bring it into this very physical realm. What am I doing? I am going to observe the monadic plane, and in doing so, I am protecting myself in even better than what a gun and a pit bull and a badass attitude would have done. How is that? Because when I observe this monadic point of my dimensions, then I directly connect with the spark of being. And that very point, that very spark, is described as, it is the point of unshakable essence that cannot be harmed, it cannot be corrupted, and it cannot be destroyed. And in that moment, and with an observation of that very spark of being, and through the grace and blood of Christ, through the grace and blood of Christ, I can directly connect to this very seed, that very point of spark. And in that very moment, I am connecting to the essence of God. So I cannot be harmed, I cannot be corrupted, and I cannot be destroyed. I am observing the very spark of my being, the monadic plane. See how powerful it is that we begin to observe these dimensions that are so active? Through observing them, we are no longer just sock puppets, being shaped and molded without our consent, as we are on this board game, and we don't even realize we're playing the game. That's why darkness is winning. Not after this podcast. So once we learn this lesson, that this lesson of there is no fear, because there is not two. I can only fear that which is outside of myself. But if I connect on this monadic plane, the spark of being, this point of unity, how can I fear then? I am unshakable. And then, before we go to the last dimension, I want to show you this. Just to orientate yourself, because we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot together. It's going to be okay. We're going to have a smoke and a coffee just now. We're nearly done. And I still need to speak about AI. So, when it comes to how we now explore, understand, learn, and practically apply the 7 dimensions of creation, a good way of looking at it is like this. Okay. So what we did first of all is we went and we looked at this part here. That was our physical dimension, our astral, our emotional dimension, and our mental dimension, where thoughts become things. This is karma. It reflects back at you, amplified. And your physical is your illusion and your trickster. Makes you think it's master, but it's mask. We are now learning about what is happening in the subtle before the physical. But in those first 3 dimensions, that is the dimensions, together they form the category of separation. Then we went into the boogic, the atmic, and the monadic dimensions, right? So we went to unity, then we went to the divine will, and there's your seed of being, your spark of life. And those 3 dimensions, they are the unity part of who you are as an individual. The mix, how you play with those, right? It's a push-pull between these forces. You can't deny one. It's not good. You're going to go off balance. It is about the interplay, the push-pull between those dimensions. But now we're going to enter the absolute. That is your final, your number 7 dimension. And the best way to describe this is that this is the dimension of perfect neutrality. This is why I say God is all around me and within me. If you go look at the ether, and you will hear something about, what's it, trickle charge. I heard that trickle charge is the term they use with what Nikola Tesla did yonks ago, 100 years ago. But trickle charge is a way of taking the potential energy in the air around you. That's what we call the ether. It takes the potential energy in the air around you, it activates it somehow, it stimulates it. which brings friction about. And it's that very friction that brings energy into being. And they call it trickle energy or trickle charge because after this activation, your phone trickle charges from the very ether around you into your pocket. And your phone charges. Well, don't put your phone in your pocket. It's not good. Yeah, your nuts are going to fall off. I'm telling you, I saw it happen once. Saw it. Guy was walking in the streets. His phone, he was talking, put the phone back in his pocket, and his nuts fell off. Clunk, 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 rolled down the road. Don't put your phone in your pocket. It's not healthy. Get a handbag or moose. So now when that's the state of perfect neutrality that scientists have now discovered that we can turn into physical energy to charge our phones. Now that perfect neutrality, that potential, energetic potential that's all around us, that is God. That is the dimension of the absolute. Now, God, they also describe it best and really, because it's difficult to explain God and describe God, right? It's the absolute dimension. What is that? It's absolute. It's absolute, dude. It's everything. That's why it's in my name. Absolute. Alles, the world, the alles. Microcosm, macrocosm, it is everything. So how do we understand God then? God is the very hand that creates the boundary for the ninth dimension even of the absolute to operate in. Perfect neutrality. But God is still the hand that gives it that boundary. Yeah. So when I say that the absolute is prior to light and prior to darkness, it is the unmanifest. And then with this explanation, how I showed you now how there's this perfect neutral energy potential in and around us. So now you go and look and you see, so what is the function of this absolute dimension? What is it trying to teach us? It is teaching us that there is a sacred space between parts. Every part, all parts, this part, that part. Yes, politicians, even you guys. There's a sacred space between your dirty part. I mustn't be that ugly to them, ne? Your perverted part. That's true. So there's a sacred space between that perverted part that is the politicians and this at least humbly striving to be a higher way of thinking and to act in that way. There's a sacred space between these parts. And compassion for those politicians is discovered in that space. Sometimes I have to look hard to find it there, but it is there. There's a sacred space between the parts where we meet. And as you are now watching this, there's a space between the video, the screen, and your eyes. And that is how you meet God. He is everywhere. Perfect neutrality. And what we are supposed to learn here is that we understand that there is not two. We are beginning to understand these dimensions that function as a slinky. We know our position and our role in it. We understand why we are here and recurrence is happening. What do you think Charlie Kirk was? A recurrence of JFK. What is humanity going to do? Are we going to say, oh, just one crazed, lonely shooter? It must be true. The politicians say so. And the CIA say so. JFK. Oh, don't call me a conspiracy theorist, I'm so scared. Just don't do that. My society, they will kick me out. That was the JFK event. Recurrence is happening. And it happened with Charlie Kirk. what are we as humanity going to do? Scatter into corners? Just don't call me a conspiracy theorist. Huh? Believe the media, the mainstream media? Believe politicians? Secret, spying agencies who really only exist because they lie. That's their very function. In this recurring event of a high political figure assassination, JFK and Charlie Kirk, thank God for Candace Owens. She is helping us to find a deeper meaning, to see deeper, so that we can work our way through the school of illusion and we can begin to see through it, so that we can, as humanity, follow the lead of people like Candace and Baron and Coach Colin and Lionel and all these brave individuals who speak truth fearlessly. Follow their lead, because that is how we begin to see the real from the unreal. Question, discover, explore, develop your crest jewel of discernment by understanding we were human before we were religious. We were human before we were scattered across this planet into different societies and cultures and ways of being. We are human. And now we as humanity, we have a better understanding of the 7 dimensions of creation. And no longer will I be shaped, molded, and formed by perverts just because I am ignorant of the true state of reality. No longer. Light has entered the room. We have come to play the game. And the heresy of separateness is no longer acceptable. I am Joan, your freaky philosopher. This is absolute reason. And I will make another video on the AI. It may be short, but it's much needed. So it will come soon. God bless.